So you've come for a Switch 2 review. Kajita's wares, if you have coin. After over 100 hours on my Switch 2, I have concluded it's good.
Really good.
And yeah, I could give you a bunch of hardware and software talking points for why it's good, like all the other tech channels, but I'd rather just show you. I've used basically all the mainstream handheld PCs in the last couple years, and the Switch blows them out of the water in this thing that I do every single day, sometimes multiple times a day. The biggest advantage of handhelds over something like an Xbox or a PlayStation or a gaming PC is portability. No surprise there to anyone. But when you're at home, it's nice to just be able to kick back and play on a bigger screen on your TV or whatever. And that's where the Switch dominates everyone else, and it's not even close. Here is that process on the Switch. Step 1, slap your Switch into a dock. If you turn on Match TV Power State in settings, which I highly recommend, then when you dock your Switch, it'll automatically turn on your TV, and same thing when turning it off. Step 2, grab the Joy-Cons off the side. You can slot them into the Joy-Con grip if you like, whatever floats your boat. And step 3, it says controller disconnected when you pop the Joy-Cons off the side. Just press A to reconnect, and then you're playing. That's the whole thing. 3 steps, and the whole thing takes me about 10 seconds to do. And depending on the game, it's also running in 4K in HDR, which is something realistically no other handhelds can do very well. 4K is just a bit too much performance demand. And as soon as you enter docked mode, the Switch 2 automatically increases the wattage fed to the system from around 10 watts in handheld to around 20 watts when docked, which makes a huge difference when outputting higher resolutions. And in some games, it even bumps up the graphics settings. It can put out more graphical grunt when it's docked because 1, it doesn't have to worry about battery life, so it can use higher wattages, and 2, it has an extra fan for cooling that's built into the dock. And this is something that just doesn't exist on the Steam Deck. I don't think most people realize just how big of a feature this is. For the system to seamlessly increase the wattage, upscale the resolution, and upgrade graphics settings all in seconds. And I also don't think this is a feature that other handhelds can or will be able to copy because it would require developers to tailor each game for both a Steam Deck handheld and a Steam Deck dock experience, and that is a huge ask. Now let's try doing that exact same thing on the Steam Deck. Step 1, slap the deck in a dock, which does not come with the console. It's an extra $80 if you buy it from Valve, but I would recommend buying a dongle because they're way cheaper, and then you can also easily use it with your laptop or iPad or whatever. I'll leave one that I use in the description below, not sponsored. Step 2, grab a controller. Unfortunately, again, the deck doesn't come with a controller in the box, and so you're gonna have to buy one. I personally like the feel of Xbox controllers. You can use whatever you like, but it's another thing you gotta pay for. There's another $50 or so, although you can get some really cheap ones, not sponsored, but 8BitDo has some great ones for pretty cheap. I'll leave them linked down below. Oh, and by the way, if you do buy an Xbox controller, make sure you have a PC or an Xbox handy because the first time you try to use it, you have to connect to a Windows PC or an Xbox to update the firmware, which is a huge pain if you're on vacation with only your Steam Deck and a MacBook and you buy an Xbox controller so that you can play a 2-player game on your Steam Deck with your little sister, only to find out that you need a Windows PC or an Xbox to use it for the first time. Is that a niche use case? Yeah, it is, but it's also exactly what happened to me and it was a huge bummer, so I just wanted to let you know. One more hurdle. Step 3, notice how the controller is working, but you can't control the game. You gotta go into settings and change the controller order because the Steam Deck itself defaults to controller number 1. Step 4, notice that the menu sounds are working, but the game sounds aren't. You gotta restart the game to fix that, but we'll do that in a second because there's one more thing we gotta fix first. Step 5, it's kinda hard to tell, but notice how the game is running in 16:10, which is the Steam Deck's aspect ratio. It's hard to see the black bezels on my projector, but you can tell if you look to the left and right side of the game how the menu pops in from outside the game area because the menu is running in 16:9, whereas the game is running in 16:10. And notice the game is running at the Steam Deck's native resolution, which is 1280x800, which is less than 1080p and dramatically less than 4K. Now, you can change the resolution by going into settings and telling it to use whatever resolution you want, but now you gotta restart the game time for that to take effect. And while something like Dead Cells, which is a very easy game to run, the Steam Deck can run in 4K, if it's even a moderately demanding game, the deck can't do 4K. And even 1080p a lot of the times can be difficult for it to run. And that's it. 5 steps. Maybe a couple more if you want to get nitpicky, and it takes a few minutes to do, mostly depending on how long it takes you to go through all the settings and then restart the game. And if we're being honest, all these steps are simple enough if you know what you're doing, but if you don't, they can be showstoppers. And the real kicker here is that they're all issues that just don't exist on the Switch. And what's even crazier is, before I got the Switch, I was totally fine with jumping through these hoops to swap between handheld and docked mode on the deck, but now that I've seen what it could be, because Nintendo showed me, it's all just too much hassle, and I don't like to dock my Steam Deck anymore. There is a reason the Switch 2 sold more consoles in the first 4 days than the Steam Deck sold in the first 4 years, and it isn't because the screen is incredible or the battery life is amazing or anything like that. It's because the majority of people buying a Switch just want to play their games. They don't want to tinker, they don't want to mess with settings, they just want to be able to sit down and play. And as much as it pains me to say it, the Switch really is in a league of its own when it comes to being dead simple to use. And the seamless docked to handheld transition is just one crystal clear example of that. And if you want to keep your Switch safe in both handheld and docked mode, this video's sponsor Mumba has you covered with their blade case and carrying case. I've been using their blade case a ton lately because it offers great protection for the Switch itself, it makes the controllers much more ergonomic and comfortable to hold, and it still fits inside the dock without removing the case itself. Oh, and it's easy to pop off the Joy-Cons because it has this hinge system on the sides. Having a case on just makes me feel a little bit safer about tossing my Switch around because, let's be real, the Switch 2 is kind of expensive. If you want to toss your Switch in a bag or a backpack, Mumba's hard case is the way to go. It's rugged and offers great protection, it can fit the Switch even with their blade case on it, and it's got a bunch of game cart storage to keep things nice and organized while you travel. If you're interested, I'll leave a link below, and thanks again to Mumba for sponsoring this section of the video. If I'm not using the Switch docked, another main way that I like to play is in bed. And the Switch is like really good in bed, you guys. I like to lay on my side and then I just pop the Joy-Cons off and prop the Switch up on a pillow, and it's way more comfy than any other handheld because you don't have to have your hands up by the screen where the screen is. It's a little thing, but little things make a big difference in bed. Now, if you're playing your Switch in bed, I'm gonna guess you're alone. And a nerd. It takes one to know one. Sorry about that. But let's say a miracle happens, and they do happen, and someone else is in bed with you. And now, you gotta be really quiet because they're trying to sleep. Well, that's where the Switch 2 also has the quietest fans that I have ever heard in a handheld. I actually can't hear them unless I put them right up to my face, which is seriously impressive. The crazy part about that is before the Switch 2, the Steam Deck OLED had the quietest fans, but next to the Switch, they sound loud as fuck. Alright, let's talk about the screen. If you're a sweaty nerd like me, you've probably seen Digital Foundry's video on it, and so here's the rub. If you want to get technical, this is not a great display. It has a terrible response time, worse than the Switch 1's, it's got pretty bad ghosting, and the brightness is barely capable of the lowest requirement for HDR, and sometimes not even that. That being said, if you don't know what response time is or ghosting is, if you look at the screen, it looks pretty great. It's big, it's bright, it's relatively color accurate. I think for most casual users, which a lot of Nintendo fans are, they're gonna love this screen. Me personally, I love this screen. I like bigger handheld screens, but I do really wish it was OLED, and given that I'm coming from the Steam Deck OLED, the screen on the Switch feels like a downgrade to me. The response time is noticeable, especially in fast, twitchy games like Dead Cells, but honestly, that's only when I'm switching between the two handhelds. If I just use the Switch, I get used to it pretty quick, and then it's not a problem for me personally. And if you're a sweaty enough gamer that you really care about that stuff, the Switch 2 probably wasn't for you anyways. What just about everyone cares about though is battery life, and the Switch 2's battery life is not great. In my worst case battery drain test with brightness maxed out, and yes, I turned off auto brightness because it won't hit the actual max brightness with auto brightness turned on, which is dumb, but whatever, Nintendo. Running Mario Kart World, I got 1 hour and 50 minutes, and that was running from 100% battery to 0% battery. There is a bug right now where some Switches report the battery percentage as lower than it actually is, so if you're going to do this test, make sure you drain the Switch until it actually dies. About 2 hours is pretty bad in my opinion for what the Switch is. I would have preferred they just make it a little bit thicker and house a bigger battery, but they didn't. So whenever they do come out with the OLED model of this thing, it will have another big selling point, and I'm fairly certain that is intentional on Nintendo's part. Planned obsolescence is a total bitch, and it frustrates me that corporations pull stunts like this. One thing they absolutely nailed though is the Joy-Con's magnetic release. It is so satisfying. I often find myself just popping them on and off just because it's fun to do. It's like a fidget toy, and while there is some play if you crank on the Joy-Cons, it's not as bad as the original Switch, so I'm not worried about it. And we gotta talk about value, and there's kind of two ways to look at the Switch as far as value goes. In my opinion, the hardware of the Switch is actually quite good value. If you look at it compared to a lot of handheld PCs, it's relatively inexpensive. $450 gets you the Switch, but it also gets you a dock and a wireless controller via these popping off the side, which is kind of cool. I would say the hardware itself is actually pretty good value, and I'm totally fine with the price that they have at $450. Where the value proposition ends for me though is when you start buying games. I like Zelda and I like Mario Kart, but $80 for a video game is really expensive. Not cool. And I don't like that Nintendo is setting this new price trend, because now that it's been set, everyone else in the industry is going to follow it, and now video games are just going to be more expensive. There's no coming back from this. The damage is done, and Nintendo did it. It's not like someone wasn't going to do it eventually, but Nintendo was the first one to do it, and now everyone's gonna follow suit, and it just means us gamers are going to be paying more money for our video games. And I'm not a fan of that. One thing though that I think a lot of people who owned the Switch 1 will appreciate though is games are backwards compatible, so you can play your Switch 1 games on your Switch 2, and almost every game that is a Switch 1 game will just run better on the Switch 2. So games that had frame rate problems, that couldn't keep a consistent 30 FPS, now will, or sometimes they even run at 60 FPS. So I feel like if you have a backlog of Switch 1 games, it makes the Switch 2 a lot better value. If you don't have a backlog of Switch 1 games, like I don't because I didn't own an original Switch, then games are really expensive, and like I said, $80 for Zelda, dude, that sucks. Like, that straight up sucks. That's expensive. Another thing that frustrates me as far as Nintendo and the value proposition is that they make you pay for online stuff. Now, I know if you're coming from like a PlayStation or an Xbox, that's just normal. But if you're coming from any handheld PC, like the Steam Deck or the Legion Go or whatever it is, the ROG Ally X, you don't have to pay for any online services, and you definitely don't have to pay for cloud saves. Whereas on the Switch, you have to pay for cloud saves. That drives me crazy, and that's something that should be free to every Switch owner. I cannot believe Nintendo has that locked behind a paywall. But yeah, if I was gonna give it to you in a nutshell, I would say I actually genuinely love the Switch 2. I've been using it a ton. It has been my go-to handheld for the past little over a month that it's been out. I love it. It's been great. I think the games are too expensive. I think the controllers are not very ergonomic, but there are workarounds for a lot of these things. Not the games. You have to pay for the games and you have to pay full price, and it's stupid. But like the controllers, you can get a Pro controller, which I got, which $85 felt too expensive for that too. That actually I didn't like either, now that I mention it. But yeah, I think Nintendo has a winner on their hands with this one. I think there are a lot of little things that could be improved, and I'd be willing to bet a lot of the reason that they didn't do those improvements are because they want the OLED to come out, whatever the Switch 2 OLED or whatever it will be. They want that to come out. They can't have this be too good, or else people aren't gonna want to buy the OLED when it comes out. So that feels frustrating, and still, this is good. This is good hardware, really good software as far as like the docking experience. They just make it dead simple to use. I just have problems with the game pricing, really, and the battery life is bad too. All right, that's it. If you have questions, let me know in the comment section below. I'm Sam, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.